Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Shortest History of China, From the Ancient Dynasties to a Modern Superpower, a Retelling for Our Times, by Linda Jaivin, narrated by Nancy Wu. Paleolithic Era, 2.5 million years ago. Neolithic Era, 10,000 to 2070 BCE, the Yellow and Fiery Emperors, circa 2852 to 2070 BCE. Ancient Era, 2070 to 221 BCE. Xia Dynasty, 2070 to 1600 BCE. Shang Dynasty, 1600 to 1050 BCE. Zhou Dynasty, Western and Eastern, including the Warring States period, 1050 to 221 BCE. Imperial Era, 221 BCE to 1911 CE. Qin Dynasty, 221 to 206 BCE. Western Han, 202 BCE to 8 CE. Eastern Han, 25 to 220 CE. Three Kingdoms and General Disunity, circa 208 to 265. Jin Dynasty, 266 to 420. 16 Kingdoms, 304 to 439. Northern and Southern Dynasties, 439 to 581. Sui Dynasty, 518 to 618. Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907. 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms, 907 to 979. Khitan Liao Dynasty, 907 to 1125. Northern Song, 960 to 1127. Jurchen Jin Dynasty, 1115 to 1234. Southern Song, 1127 to 1279. Mongol Yuan Dynasty, 1271 to 1368. Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644. Manchu Qing Dynasty, 1644 to 1911. Modern Era, 1912 to today. Republic of China, on the mainland, 1912 to 1949. Taiwan, 1949, onwards. People's Republic of China, 1949 to present. Peking Man, first Aboriginal Australians, 50,000 years ago. Yellow River Civilization, Stonehenge, circa 3000 BCE. Great Pyramid of Giza, circa 2880 BCE. Oracle Bones, Mammoth Extinction, circa 1650 BCE. I Ching, The Art of War, Confucius, Mencius, Lao Tzu, Han Feizi. Buddha, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Unification. Invention of paper, the compass, and woodblock printing. Silk Roads, Wangmang Rebellion, 8 to 25 CE. Rosetta Stone, 196 BCE. Roman Empire, 27 BCE to 476 CE. Battle of Red Cliffs, 208. Gathering at the Orchid Pavilion, 353. Classic Mayan Civilization. The Grand Canal, Middle Ages, Muhammad, 571 to 632. Spread of Buddhism, Golden Age of Poetry. An Lushan Rebellion, 755 to 763. Viking Civilization, Ghana Empire. Foot Binding, Goryeo Dynasty, Korea. Battle of Hastings, 1066. Neo-Confucianism, Urbanization. Islamic Golden Age, Crusades. Kublai Khan, Marco Polo. European Renaissance. The Forbidden City, Golden Age of the Novel, Zheng He's Maritime Exploration. Inca Empire, Age of Exploration. Conquest of Xinjiang and Tibet, Opium Wars. Enlightenment, Age of Imperialism and Colonialism. 100 Days Reform, Republican Revolution. Industrial Revolution. Warlord era, Japanese invasion and resistance, Civil War. World War I, founding of the Soviet Union, World War II. Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution, Death of Mao, Deng Xiaoping's Reform Era, Xi Jinping's New Era. Korean War, Cold War, Dissolution of the Soviet Union, September 11th, COVID-19 pandemic. Introduction. There is no Chinese curse that goes, "May you live in interesting times." In any case, it would be redundant. Chinese history simmers with larger-than-life characters, philosophical arguments and political intrigues, military conflicts and social upheavals, artistic invention and technological innovation. It progresses in twists, turns, leaps, and returns. Chinese historical records are long and deep, stretching back at least 3,500 years. Their themes and lessons, as well as the memories of wounds and triumphs, pulsate under the surface of contemporary Chinese life, language, culture, and politics. The increasingly key role of the People's Republic of China, PRC, plays in global affairs, makes an awareness of this history essential, for it is the key to understanding China today. Take, for example, the insistence of the Communist Party of China, CPC, that Hong Kong and Taiwan, along with Tibet, Xinjiang, and islands in the South China Sea, are part of China. The intensity with which the CPC pursues reunification has roots in the humiliation and semi-colonization of China by imperialist powers in the 19th century and the Civil War of the 20th century. It also speaks to violent periods of division that occurred as long as 2,000 years ago, but have left their stamp on the national psyche. That the first great unification in 221 BCE, which also involved the epic standardization of weights, measures, and the written language, came with a high dose of tyranny, is also part of this history's complex legacy. Nothing about China is small in scale. With some 1.4 billion people, the PRC boasts the world's largest population, nearly 1 in every 5 people on Earth, not counting another 45 million people worldwide who identify as Chinese. At 3.6 million square miles, 9.3 million square kilometers, it occupies the third largest landmass of any country after Russia and Canada, and shares borders with 14 nations. The PRC is the world's largest trading nation and second largest economy, a manufacturing powerhouse and an assertive military power. Its army bigger than any other national armed force. It plays a steadily increasing role in global institutions and international affairs. The PRC's trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative, with projects in countries as diverse as Afghanistan, Ecuador, Bahrain, Bulgaria, Ethiopia, and Vietnam, is the most ambitious global infrastructure building project in history. Domestic schemes are often no less monumental, whether they involve constructing giant dams, establishing pervasive systems of surveillance, or creating the longest open-sea fixed link on the planet, the 34-mile-long, 55-kilometer Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. The PRC is also a leader in artificial intelligence, green technology, and communications network infrastructure, and aims to become a world leader in science and technology by 2050. The rise of the People's Republic has inspired a range of reactions abroad, including concern about political influence operations and human rights violations. Beijing's insistence that it defines human rights differently than the West does little to reassure its critics. Although the CPC claims to speak on behalf of all 1.4 billion Chinese nationals, history makes it clear that the people of this great land have always embraced a range of intellectual, philosophical, political, and cultural positions. China is diverse in numerous ways. If more than 90% of the population claim Han ethnicity, the rest belong to 55 other ethnic groups, including Uyghurs, Mongolians, and Tibetans. Many speak distinct languages and retain their own religious and cultural practices, despite pressure to assimilate. The Han, too, may identify with different regional cultures and subcultures, and speak discrete, and even mutually unintelligible dialects, including Shanghainese and Cantonese, the latter claiming more native speakers, over 62 million, than Italian. The national language, Putonghua, sometimes called Mandarin in English, is a constructed tongue. The PRC's own Ministry of Education admitted in 2013 that it was spoken with native fluency by less than 10% of the population and barely at all by 30%, though it aimed to change that. Northerners prefer wheat and Southerners rice, but not always. Some Chinese never touch chili, while others can't cook without it. Beijingers complain that Shanghainese are mercantile and petty. Shanghainese snipe back that Beijingers are big-hearted but crude. All stereotypes fall apart in the face of Chinese diversity. The citizenry of the PRC includes subsistence farmers and jet-setting billionaires, Buddhist monks and nightclub owners, passionate feminists and steely patriarchs, avant-garde artists and aerospace engineers, yak herders and film animators, pro-democracy activists, and loyal communists. They may live in towering apartment blocks, courtyard houses built to a 2,000-year-old design, European-style villas, longhouses, stilt houses, yurts, or even modified caves. They may be fans of Peking opera, Western opera, punk, throat singing, cantopop, chess, video games, Korean soap operas, calligraphy, photography, ballroom dancing, fan dancing, all or none of those. The heavily urbanized landscape of China's 23 provinces and 5 autonomous regions, Guangxi, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, Ningxia, and Xinjiang, is as varied as its people, ranging from frozen steppes to tropical islands, jungles, deserts, fertile farmland, tall mountains, and low flood plains. The PRC boasts several of the most populous cities on Earth. Its 4 provincial-level municipalities include Chongqing, home to more than 30 million, and Shanghai, with more than 26 million. Aside from the Yangtze, the 3rd longest river in the world, 6 of Asia's major rivers originate in Tibet: the Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Irrawaddy, Salween, and Mekong. The construction of upstream dams, mines, and irrigation projects, and even the afforestation of the Tibetan Plateau, have all implications for the water security of almost half the world's population. President Xi Jinping's pledge to the United Nations in September 2020 that China will reduce its net carbon emissions to 0 by 2060, if followed through, could help address climate change and determine the future of the planet itself. A disciple once asked Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, the first thing he'd do if he were in charge. Confucius replied, "Rectify the names." He explained, "If the names are not correct, if they do not match realities, language has no object. If language is without an object, action becomes impossible, and therefore all human affairs disintegrate and their management becomes pointless and impossible." The first appearance of the name China in a European language is in a 16th century Spanish text. The word seemingly derives from references to the ancient Qin dynasty, 221 to 206 BCE, via Sanskrit, China, and Japanese, Xina. In Chinese, the most common expression for China in the sense of a nation is Zhongguo. This expression dates back 3,000 years to the ancient compilation of poetry, the Book of Odes, Shi Jing. Zhong means middle or center. The second character, guo, contains a mouth, kou, representing the people, and a dagger axe, ge, signifying defense within an enclosure, wei. Guo originally referred to a fortified city, only later coming to mean a kingdom and finally a nation-state. Although Zhongguo is often translated as Middle Kingdom, Zhong originally referred to the center of the kingdom or city, rather than implying that the kingdom itself was at the center of the world. Another popular way to refer to China is Zhonghua. Hua can signify splendor, radiance, or prosperity. It was the name of one of the 2 ancient tribes of settlers along the Yellow River from which Han Chinese claim descent. Zhonghua is less about a specific territory than a civilization, encompassing notions of myth, legend, history, and culture. It embraces the broader Chinese world, radiating out from the mainland, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, to diasporic communities from Canberra to California, Singapore to Senegal. Although there are other phrases that signify China, it's reasonable to say that the idea of China lies somewhere between Zhongguo and Zhonghua. The outline maps that appear in this book are not of the PRC, but of territory that either is now or at one time has been part of something understood as Zhongguo or Zhonghua. For most of history, people identified with their dynasty, as a man or woman of the Tang, for example, rather than as Chinese. It was only after a Republican revolution overthrew the last dynasty, the Qing, in 1911, that the country incorporated China into its name. Both the Republic of China, founded in 1911, and the post-1949 People's Republic of China use Zhonghua rather than Zhongguo to stand for China. Confucius also intended the principle known as the rectification of names to indicate who was privileged to speak. It was more than 40 years ago that I began studying Chinese history and language, and I have lived and traveled extensively in the mainland, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Although I am not Chinese, I take encouragement from the words of the historian Liu Xu, 887 to 947, who drew this lesson about the writing of history from chess. Those in the game see less clearly than those observing from outside. Controversy swirls around many Chinese historical events and actors. Confucius promoted moderation in all things and a strict social hierarchy. Did his ideas ensure the stability and continuity of Chinese civilization, or hold China back from progress? Chinese thinkers have hotly debated Confucius's ideas for thousands of years. I'll do my best to represent fairly, or at least note the existence of, diverse perspectives on this and other issues. Some readers might find this politically inconvenient or confronting. My loyalty is to historical truth, as I best understand it. For transcribing Chinese words and names in this book, I use Hanyu Pinyin, the official romanization system of the PRC, except where an older spelling will be more familiar to readers. Confucius rather than Kongzi, Sun Yat-sen instead of Sun Zhongshan, Chiang Kai-shek over Jiang Jieshi, the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers rather than Changjiang and Huanghe, and I Ching for the ancient book of divination, I Ching, for example. I do use Dao De Jing instead of the perhaps more familiar Tao Te Ching for the Taoist classic, as it is closer to the actual pronunciation. Ditto Sunzi rather than Sun Tzu for the author of The Art of War. The terms chancellor and prime minister both indicate the chief minister in an emperor's court. Chinese is a tonal language. The contoured pitch at which words are spoken is integral to the meaning. When using pinyin, I add diacritics to indicate the 4 tones of Putonghua in the first instance a word appears, as well as in the index, where you'll also find the Chinese characters for individuals' names. Pinyin is a relatively straightforward guide to pronunciation for speakers of European languages, with a few quirks. X, as in Xi Jinping, is pronounced like the SH in Xi. C, as in Cao Cao, is pronounced like the TS in its. Q, as in the Qin dynasty, is pronounced like the CH in cheese. ZH, as in Zhou Enlai, is pronounced like a J, but with the tongue curled almost to the roof of the mouth, and Z, as in Zun Yi, is like the DS in ads. When the CPC came to power in 1949, less than a quarter of the population could read or write. To promote literacy, they simplified many of the 10,000 most commonly used characters, including some of the 2,000 to 3,000 characters necessary for basic literacy. I use the traditional complex forms until we reach 1949, and the simplified forms thereafter, except in reference to Taiwan and Hong Kong, where complex forms are still in use. Chinese surnames come before given names, Ai is the surname of the artist Ai Weiwei, and Sima, the surname of the ancient historian Sima Qian. Scholars, writers, and emperors typically went by several names or titles over a lifetime. To avoid confusion, I chose the most common, identifying emperors by their reign titles, the Qianlong Emperor, using lady for imperial concubines, secondary wives of different ranks, and referring to authors by their pen names. China and the adjective Chinese here mainly refer to China in a historical or cultural sense. The China of the Tang Dynasty, or Chinese calligraphy, for example. I use the acronym PRC when referring specifically to the People's Republic of China and the mainland to indicate the part of the Chinese world over which the CPC has exercised direct rule since 1949. Hong Kong signifies the territory encompassing Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, and the New Territories, formerly known as the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. Taiwan indicates the geographical and political entity that officially calls itself the Republic of China, and that the CPC insists must be referred to as Taiwan, China. Another thing, the S in Great Walls and Silk Roads is not a typo. The Great Walls are a series of discontinuous and sometimes parallel fortifications constructed over different historical periods. Similarly, there were several trading routes for silk and other goods in ancient times, including one also known as the Tea Road, originating in China's southwest, where tea was first cultivated. In writing a short history, a wise person might focus on a few key themes or personalities. I'm not so wise. Faced with deciding between key individuals, economic and social developments, military history, and aesthetic and intellectual currents, I choose everything. I highlight themes, events, and personalities that I think illuminate the essence of their time and the evolution of Chinese civilization and nationhood. I don't name-check all of China's many emperors, rebels, thinkers, artists, eccentrics, inventors, politicians, or poets. I do introduce you to some of the most influential and interesting ones. And, to the extent possible in such a short volume, let them speak for themselves. You'll read quotations from the work of ancient historians, modern politicians, poets, and satirists. History is, of course, her story as well. Expect to meet a few more women in this book than you may find in other general histories. China contains a multitude. Its unruly complexity is part of its grandeur. 1. Origins. An egg hatches, and a civilization is born. Far, far back in time, a popular Chinese creation story tells us, primal chaos congealed into an egg, in which the complementary cosmic energies of yin and yang thickened around a hairy-horned giant called Pangu. 18,000 years passed. Pangu hatched fully formed, holding an axe, with which he hacked apart the yin and yang. The yin became the earth beneath his feet, and the yang, the sky. As he grew taller, he pushed the two further and further apart. After Pangu died, his flesh turned to soil, his sweat to rain, and his breath to wind. His blood flowed as rivers and seas. His eyes became the sun and the moon. From his hair sprang plants and trees, and the fleas in his fur became animals and people. Eons flew by. Warring deities laid waste to the heavens. Then Nuwa, the daughter of the celestial Jade Emperor, repaired the sky with colored stones. Some say it was Nuwa who created humans, fashioning them from clay. Around 780,000 years ago, the Yellow River flowed much closer to the place we call Beijing than it does now, creating a fertile alluvial plain. Wild pigs, buffalo, sheep, and deer roamed the lush meadows that spread out from China's second-largest river, and birds nested in forests dense with nut and fruit trees. In caves in the surrounding mountains, Peking man, Homo erectus pekinensis, and other of humankind's Stone Age ancestors sheltered from saber-toothed cats, wolves, bears, panthers, and other predators, coming down to the flats to hunt and gather. Two tribes, the Hua and Xia, from whom the ethnic majority Han Chinese claim descent, settled around the river's middle and lower reaches. At some point around 13,000 years ago, one of them carved a bird from singed bone, 2 centimeters in length and balanced on a pedestal, the most ancient animal sculpture ever found in East Asia. Farming heralded the beginning of the Neolithic, New Stone Age. In the relatively arid north, people cultivated millet, and in the fertile ground of the south, rice. Farmers raised pigs, sheep, and cattle, and domesticated wild dogs. They built homes of mud brick, mud-plastered wood, and stone. In some places, their dwellings featured glossy red pottery walls and roofs of fired mud and wood. The houses clustered in walled communities that would eventually dot the Central Plains. With more time for leisure, people crafted bowls, goblets, and musical instruments of fired clay, decorating them with abstract patterns and zoomorphic figures. They carved jade, turquoise, and bone into jewelry and objects for use in worship or burial rites. A fragment of silk from the Yellow River Valley, the oldest in the world, shows that the Chinese practiced sericulture, the production of silk, as early as 3630 BCE. Sericulture seems to have been largely women's work from the start, from chopping mulberry leaves to feed the silkworms, the larvae of the Bombyx mori moth, to collecting the cocoons and boiling them to loosen their threads before spinning, dyeing, and weaving them into cloth. Silk would eventually play an important part in China's diplomacy and trade, as well as in fashion, communications, and art, serving as paper and canvas. But how did anyone think of boiling moth cocoons in the first place? One story goes that Madame Xiling, the principal wife of the semi-mythical Yellow Emperor, was sipping tea under a mulberry tree when a cocoon dropped into her cup and began to unspool. Gathering up the shimmering thread, she realized it was strong enough to weave. Other legends say it was Xiling's husband, the Yellow Emperor himself, who figured this out. Similar legends credit him with inventing many other things, from carts, boats, wooden houses, and the pottery wheel, to the calendar, and even a bamboo pan flute, tuned to the song of the mythical phoenix, a totem of the south as the dragon is of the north. A mighty general, the Yellow Emperor fought fierce battles against his rivals, said to include horned demons and giants, to unify the tribes north of the Yellow River. Accounts that also credit the Yellow Emperor with inventing writing underlie the popular claim that China has 5,000 years of recorded history. The earliest hard evidence of Chinese script, however, dates back 3,500 years, which makes it the third or fourth oldest system of writing in the world, after those of the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians, and possibly the Minoans, whose writing system developed around the same time as the Chinese. It's unclear if the Yellow Emperor was an actual individual who, in the telling and retelling of his story, acquired godlike characteristics, or if he began as a god and was later given a human face. He has been a cult figure since the 5th century BCE. Han Chinese consider the Yellow Emperor and his successor, Yan Di, the Fiery Emperor, their oldest ancestors. Another semi-mythical dynasty, the Xia, began around 2100 BCE, after the reign of another 3 legendary emperors, Yao, Shun, and Yu. Historical records firm up around 500 or 600 years later, when the Bronze Age began, and with it, the Shang dynasty, which lasted more than 600 years, beginning in the 16th century BCE. The Shang ruled over the fertile land on the lower reaches of the Yellow River from its capital of Anyang in today's Hunan province. Records on shell and bone. The rulers of the Shang dynasty were warlike and highly superstitious, worshipping a number of gods and conducting human sacrifices to them. They kept slaves, including musicians and dancers. Each king had a primary wife and many secondary ones, or concubines. For most of Chinese history, men with the means to provide for more than one wife were free to take concubines. In the Chinese language, a man takes, 娶, a wife, whereas a woman is given, 嫁, in marriage.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?